My daughter left me outside in 95-degree heat, like a forgotten stray dog, while she entertained guests inside her air-conditioned home. I'm 72 years old, and I raised her alone. Today I'm going to tell you something I never thought I'd share. And if you, for even a second, feel like this sounds familiar, I just ask that you leave a like and subscribe, because this story might help someone draw closer to God's love. Amen. My name is Margaret Dawson, and I live in Jacksonville, Florida. Well, I live there now. But this story begins in a screened-in porch that felt more like a prison than a home. The morning sun was already brutal at 8 a.m., casting harsh shadows through the mesh screens as I sat on a plastic lawn chair that stuck to my legs through my cotton dress. The floral pattern I'd chosen so carefully for this visit, hoping to look presentable for my grandchildren, was now wrinkled and damp with perspiration. My Bible lay open on my lap to Psalm 27. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? But in that moment, fear was all I felt. The oscillating fan Olivia had graciously provided barely moved the thick, humid air. It whirred back and forth with mechanical persistence, offering moments of relief that lasted exactly 3 seconds before the heat settled back over me like a suffocating blanket. Through the glass sliding door, I could see my daughter moving around her beautiful kitchen, granite countertops gleaming, stainless steel appliances humming quietly, central air conditioning maintaining a perfect 72 degrees. I had been sitting here for 18 hours. Not by choice. Olivia had invited me for what she called a family weekend, after months of barely hearing from her. Months of short phone calls that felt more like obligations than conversations. She had called with what sounded like genuine warmth in her voice. "The kids miss you, Mom. Trevor's been asking when Grandma Margaret is coming to visit. You'll love our new place. Just pack light. It's hot down here in July." So I'd packed light. One small suitcase with my medication, my Bible, my rosary, and modest gifts for 8-year-old Emma and 10-year-old Jacob. I had spent my Social Security check on those gifts. A beautiful illustrated children's Bible for Emma, who I remembered loving stories, and a wooden cross necklace for Jacob, who was approaching confirmation age. I wrapped them in tissue paper I'd saved from Christmas, wrote little notes about how proud I was of them, how much I loved them. The 3-hour bus ride from Gainesville had been uncomfortable, but filled with anticipation. I stared out the window at palm trees and strip malls, praying silently, thanking God for this opportunity to reconnect with my family. "Lord," I whispered, "let this be a healing time. Let them see me not as a burden, but as their mother, their grandmother. Let love fill this house." When the bus pulled into Jacksonville, I saw Olivia waiting in her silver SUV, checking her phone. She looked up when she saw me approaching, and for a moment, just a moment, her smile seemed genuine. She was still my little girl, still the daughter I had raised alone after Robert walked out when she was 2 years old, still the child I had worked double shifts for, prayed over during every fever, celebrated with during every achievement. "Hey, Mom," she said, offering a brief hug that felt more like a social courtesy than maternal affection. "How was the ride? You look tired." I was tired. I was always tired these days. 72 years of nursing others, caring for others, putting others first, had settled into my bones like a permanent ache. But I smiled and told her I was fine, grateful to be here, excited to see the grandchildren. "About that," Olivia said as we drove through her neighborhood of new construction homes with perfect lawns and 2-car garages. "The kids are super busy with summer activities. Jacob has baseball camp. Emma has dance. They might not be around much, but they're excited you're here." The house was impressive. 2 stories, colonial style, with a manicured front yard and flower beds that clearly received professional attention. Trevor's BMW sat in the driveway next to Olivia's SUV. Through the large front windows, I could see beautiful furnishings, hardwood floors, family photos arranged on what looked like an expensive entertainment center. "It's beautiful, honey," I said, meaning it. "You've done so well for yourself." Olivia seemed pleased by the compliment, but something in her demeanor shifted as we approached the front door. Her shoulders tensed. Her smile became more forced. "So, Mom, there's been a little change in plans. The guest room is kind of occupied right now. The kids have taken it over with their summer stuff, and Trevor's been using it as a temporary office. But we've set up a really nice space for you." She led me through the front door, past the living room where I caught glimpses of leather furniture and a large flat-screen television, past the kitchen with its restaurant-quality appliances, through the dining room with its polished table set for what looked like company. We walked through sliding glass doors onto a screened-in porch at the back of the house. "Here," Olivia announced with forced enthusiasm. "Isn't this perfect? You've got privacy, fresh air, and look, we even got you a fan." I stood there, speechless, staring at my accommodations. A plastic lounge chair, the kind you might find at a discount store. A small plastic table, the oscillating fan I would come to know intimately. A view of their backyard, where an expensive playset sat unused, and a swimming pool sparkled invitingly in the afternoon sun. "Where?" I began, then stopped myself. "Where do I sleep?" "Oh, right here," Olivia said, patting the lounge chair. "It reclines all the way back. It's almost like a bed, and you won't be bothered by any of our noise this way." Trevor appeared in the doorway, barely glancing at me. "Hey, Margaret," he said with the tone one might use to greet a delivery person. "Olivia told you about the sleeping arrangements. The house is pretty full right now." Full. Their 3,000-square-foot house was full. I nodded, not trusting my voice. I sat down in the plastic chair and felt it stick to my legs immediately. The July heat was already oppressive, and it was only mid-afternoon. "Great," Olivia said, clapping her hands together. "Well, I'll let you get settled. Dinner's at 6. We'll bring you a plate." And then they were gone, sliding the glass door closed behind them. I sat there, alone, watching them move around their kitchen through the glass like actors in a television show I wasn't allowed to participate in. I opened my Bible and tried to read, but the words blurred through unexpected tears. This wasn't what I had prayed for during that long bus ride. This wasn't the family reunion I had imagined. I was a guest, but I was also clearly unwelcome inside their real home. As evening approached, I watched through the glass as Trevor's mother arrived. A woman I had met perhaps 3 times in the 15 years Olivia had been married. She was welcomed with hugs, shown immediately to what I assumed was the guest room I'd been told was occupied, invited to sit at the kitchen island while Olivia poured wine, and they laughed together. At 6:30, Emma appeared at the sliding door with a paper plate covered in aluminum foil. "Grandma," she said through the glass, "Mom said to give you this. Can you open the door, sweetheart?" I asked. Emma glanced back toward the kitchen, then slid the door open just wide enough to hand me the plate. "I have to go back inside now. Mom says I need to help serve dessert." And then she was gone, and I was alone again with a lukewarm chicken breast, some rice, and vegetables that had clearly been an afterthought. I ate in the growing darkness, listening to the sound of conversation and laughter drifting from inside the house, feeling more invisible than I'd ever felt in my life. That night, as I tried to find a comfortable position on the plastic lounge chair, I pulled my rosary from my purse and began to pray. "Hail Mary, full of grace," I whispered in the darkness. "The Lord is with thee." But the words felt hollow in the humid air, lost among the sounds of insects and the distant hum of air conditioning that cooled everyone in the house except me. I thought about all the nights I'd prayed for Olivia, all the times I'd knelt beside her bed when she was sick, begging God to heal her, all the years I'd worked extra shifts to pay for her dance lessons, her school clothes, her college tuition. I thought about the sacrifices that had seemed so natural, so necessary, so filled with love, and I wondered, for the first time in my life, if any of it had mattered at all. The second day dawned with the same merciless Florida sun, but something had shifted inside me during that sleepless night on the plastic chair. As I watched the sunrise through the screen mesh, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that God had designed to remind us of His beauty, I found myself remembering not just yesterday's humiliation, but decades of moments that had led me here. I had given Olivia everything. Everything. When Robert left us, walked out on a Tuesday morning with nothing but a suitcase and a note saying he needed to find himself, Olivia was barely 2 years old. She stood at the front window for weeks afterward, pressing her tiny hands against the glass, asking, "Daddy? Daddy?" Until the word broke my heart into pieces I'm still finding. I was 28 years old, a licensed practical nurse making $8.50 an hour, suddenly responsible for a mortgage, daycare, and a daughter who cried herself to sleep every night. But I never let her see me cry. Instead, I would sit by her bed after she fell asleep, holding my Bible, whispering prayers. "Lord, give me strength. Help me be enough for her. Help me fill the space her father left empty. Those early years were a blur of double shifts at Jacksonville Memorial Hospital, coming home exhausted to find Olivia with Mrs. Chen, our elderly neighbor who watched her for practically nothing because she understood what it meant to struggle. I would pick up my daughter, help her with homework I was too tired to focus on, make dinner from whatever was on sale at the grocery store, and read her Bible stories until she fell asleep. Every Christmas I worked overtime for weeks to afford the toys she wanted. Every birthday I baked cakes from scratch because bakery cakes cost money we didn't have. When she broke her arm falling from the monkey bars in 3rd grade, I held her in the emergency room, stroking her hair while we waited 4 hours because we didn't have insurance that would get us seen faster. "It's going to be okay, baby," I whispered that night as the doctor set her arm. "Mommy's here. Mommy will always be here." And I was. For every school play where I sat in the front row, taking pictures with a camera I'd saved for 3 months to buy. For every parent-teacher conference where her teachers praised her intelligence and kindness, never knowing that those qualities came from bedtime stories about Jesus' love and morning prayers about treating others with compassion. When Olivia was 12, she started asking about designer clothes, name-brand shoes, the things her classmates had that we couldn't afford. I picked up weekend shifts at a nursing home, cleaning duties that left my knees screaming and my back aching, just to buy her the jeans she wanted for the school dance. "You're the best mom in the world," she had said that night, twirling in front of our bedroom mirror in those expensive jeans. "I love you so much." I held on to those words through the teenage years, when she became embarrassed by our small apartment, our old car, my uniforms that smelled faintly of hospital disinfectant, when she started spending more time at friends' houses with fathers and swimming pools and new cars in the driveway. "Why can't we have nice things like normal families?" she asked one evening when she was 16, her voice filled with the particular cruelty that only teenagers can achieve without realizing how deeply their words cut. "We have love," I told her, though my heart was breaking. "We have each other. We have God watching over us." She rolled her eyes. "God doesn't pay for designer clothes, Mom." But I kept praying for her, kept believing that the values I was trying to instill, faith, gratitude, compassion, would eventually take root beneath the adolescent desires for material things. When she graduated high school, I was so proud I cried through the entire ceremony. She had earned a partial scholarship to Florida State, but partial wasn't enough. So I took out loans, picked up a 3rd job cleaning offices at night, slept 4 hours a night for 4 years to make sure she could focus on her studies instead of working. I sent care packages every month, homemade cookies, toiletries, $20 bills tucked into cards with Bible verses about God's provision. "Trust in the Lord with all your heart," I would write, "and lean not on your own understanding." She called home less and less as college progressed. When she did call, it was usually about money, textbooks, lab fees, sorority dues I couldn't afford, but somehow found a way to pay. I refinanced the house, cashed in my small retirement fund, told myself that investing in her future was what mothers do. Trevor appeared during her junior year. He came from money. His father owned a chain of auto dealerships. His mother had never worked a day in her life. When Olivia brought him home for Thanksgiving, I saw how he looked at our modest duplex, our secondhand furniture, my uniform hanging by the door. "So you're a nurse," he said, making it sound like I cleaned sewers for a living. "She's the best nurse in Jacksonville," Olivia said quickly, but I heard the embarrassment in her voice. She was already changing, already becoming someone who saw my life's work as something to apologize for, rather than be proud of. The wedding cost me everything. Literally everything. I mortgaged the house again, borrowed against my car, even asked the pastor if the church had any emergency funds for families in crisis. Because Olivia wanted the perfect day. And what kind of mother denies her daughter the perfect day? "I want you to walk me down the aisle," she said when we were planning. "Since Dad's not, you've been both parents to me." I cried when she said that. Finally, recognition. Finally, acknowledgement of the sacrifices, the love, the years of being enough for both of us. The wedding was beautiful. Olivia looked like an angel in her dress that cost more than I made in 3 months. I walked her down the aisle, feeling proud and heartbroken at the same time, knowing I was giving her away to a life I could never provide, but had always wanted her to have. After the honeymoon, The calls became even less frequent. Christmas cards replaced phone calls. Birthday cards arrived a week late. When Emma was born, I drove 6 hours to Jacksonville to help, only to be told that Trevor's mother was already there. And too many people make the house chaotic. I held my granddaughter for exactly 20 minutes before being politely asked to leave so the baby could nap. Jacob's birth was similar. I sent gifts, cards, prayers from a distance while Trevor's family provided the hands-on support, the Sunday dinners, the holiday traditions that I had dreamed of sharing. "Mom, you understand, right?" Olivia said during one of our brief phone calls when Jacob was 3. "It's just easier with Trevor's family. They're closer and his mom doesn't work, so she can help more." I understood. I understood that my decades of sacrifice had earned me the right to love them from a distance, to send birthday cards and Christmas gifts, and receive thank you texts in return, to be grateful for whatever crumbs of affection were thrown my way. Now, sitting on this plastic chair for the second morning in a row, I could smell bacon cooking in the kitchen. Trevor's mother, Patricia, was already up, already welcomed into the morning routine that I had been excluded from. Through the glass, I watched her flip pancakes while Olivia poured orange juice into tall glasses, chatting and laughing like old friends. No one had brought me breakfast. No one had asked if I was hungry. No one had acknowledged that I existed. My stomach cramped with hunger, but more than that, my soul ached with a loneliness so profound. I wondered if this was what hell felt like, being surrounded by the people you love most while being completely invisible to them. I opened my Bible to Psalm 22. My God, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far from saving me, so far from my cries of anguish? David's words, written thousands of years ago, felt like they had been penned specifically for this moment, this porch, this crushing realization that love given without limit could somehow result in treatment worse than what strangers might offer. As I read, Emma appeared at the sliding door, pressing her face against the glass. For a moment, my heart lifted. Maybe she wanted to talk to her grandmother. Maybe she remembered the stories I used to tell her over video calls, the prayers we used to say together before bedtime when she was smaller. But she just stared at me with curious eyes, like I was an exhibit in a zoo, before running back inside calling, "Mom! Why is Grandma just sitting out there?" I heard Olivia's muffled response. "She likes the fresh air, sweetheart. Don't bother her. Don't bother her." As if I were the one who wanted to be isolated. As if I had chosen this exile from the family I devoted my entire life to building. That afternoon I watched through the glass as they prepared for what was obviously a dinner party. Good china came out of cabinets. Flowers were arranged in vases. The dining room table was set for 8 people. I was not one of them. Patricia was bustling around the kitchen like she owned it, directing Emma and Jacob in setting napkins and polishing silverware. The children, my grandchildren, followed her instructions eagerly, calling her Grandma Patty, with the kind of affection I had dreamed of hearing in their voices when they spoke my name. When the guests arrived, other couples from their neighborhood, people who looked like they belonged in this house, this life, I became even more invisible. The party moved from the kitchen to the living room to the back patio, where they set up chairs around the pool. My chair. My section of the porch was now part of their entertainment space, except I wasn't entertaining. I was furniture. A piece of outdoor furniture that happened to be occupied by an inconvenient old woman. "Oh," one of the guests said when she noticed me. "Hello there. That's Trevor's mother-in-law," Patricia explained quickly. "She's visiting for a few days." Mother-in-law. Not grandmother. Not Margaret. Not the woman who raised the daughter they were celebrating. I smiled and waved, trying to maintain dignity, but inside, I was screaming. How had this happened? How had I become so thoroughly erased from the family I had created with my own blood, sweat, tears, and prayers? As evening fell and the dinner party moved back inside, I was left alone again with the mosquitoes and the humidity, and the crushing weight of understanding that I had spent 50 years of my life loving people who saw me as an obligation, rather than a blessing. I pulled out my rosary again, running my fingers over the smooth beads that had comforted me through Robert's abandonment. Through years of financial struggle, through every crisis and challenge that had threatened to destroy us. "Holy Mary, Mother of..." I whispered, "Pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death." But as I prayed, one question kept echoing in my mind. Am I being tested? Or just forgotten? The third day began with what I thought might be a miracle. When I woke up, If you could call the restless dozing I'd managed on that plastic chair sleep. I heard voices in the kitchen that sounded almost considerate. "We should probably check on her," Emma was saying. "She's been out there for 2 whole days." My heart fluttered with hope. Maybe my granddaughter had inherited some of the compassion I'd tried so hard to instill in her mother. Maybe innocence would succeed where a lifetime of love had failed. "Grandma Patty says old people need lots of rest," Jacob replied. "And Mom says Grandma Margaret likes being outside." Old people. As if I were a different species entirely. As if 72 years of living, loving, and surviving had reduced me to nothing more than an aging body that required management rather than respect. Through the glass, I watched Patricia, who was exactly 2 years younger than me, sitting comfortably at the kitchen island, sipping coffee from a beautiful ceramic mug while directing the morning routine like she'd been part of this family for decades, instead of being an in-law who appeared for holidays and special occasions. "The humidity is supposed to be terrible today," Patricia was saying to Olivia. "We should probably stay inside and have a movie day with the kids." A movie day in the air-conditioned living room, with popcorn and comfortable couches, and the kind of family bonding that I had dreamed of sharing with my grandchildren. Nobody suggested including me. Around 10 o'clock, Olivia finally approached the sliding door. She opened it just wide enough to stick her head out, letting as little of the blessed cool air escape as possible. "Morning, Mom," she said with forced cheerfulness. "How are you feeling?" How was I feeling? My back ached from the plastic chair. My clothes were damp with sweat despite the early hour. My stomach was cramping from hunger. No one had brought me dinner the night before, and breakfast was apparently not a consideration. But more than any physical discomfort, I felt like I was disappearing, becoming less real with each passing hour. "I'm fine, honey," I lied. Because what else could I say? That I was dying inside? That I felt more alone surrounded by my family than I had in the empty duplex back in Gainesville? "Great," Olivia said, already backing away from the door. "Well, we're planning a quiet day inside. The sun's supposed to be brutal. You've got shade out there, though." And then she was gone again, sliding the door closed with what sounded like relief. Shade. I had shade. As if shade could protect me from the brutal realization that I had become a problem to be solved, rather than a person to be loved. The day stretched endlessly ahead of me. I tried to read my Bible, but the words seemed to mock me. "Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother, which is the first commandment with a promise, so that it may go well with you, and that you may enjoy long life on the earth." Where was my honor? Where was the respect that a lifetime of sacrifice was supposed to earn? I thought about Mrs. Chen, the elderly woman who had helped me with Olivia all those years ago. She had passed away 5 years ago, alone in a nursing home, her own children too busy to visit. I had gone to her funeral, one of only 6 people in attendance. At the time, I had judged those children harshly. How could they neglect someone who had given them life, who had loved them unconditionally? Now I was beginning to understand how easily it happened, how gradually love could fade into obligation, and obligation could fade into resentment, and resentment could fade into complete indifference. Around noon, the mailman arrived. I watched him walk to the front door, and suddenly I had an idea. Maybe if I could get to him, I could ask him to call someone. The church, maybe. Pastor Williams would come get me. He would understand that something was terribly wrong here. I stood up from the chair, my joints protesting after hours of sitting, and walked to the screen door that led to the side yard. But it was locked, from the outside. I pushed against it, rattled the handle, but it wouldn't budge. They had locked me in. Maybe it was for security, I told myself. Maybe they were just being careful. But as I stood there, pushing against a door that should have opened easily, I felt like a caged animal, a pet that had been contained for the convenience of its owners. I knocked on the glass sliding door, hoping to get someone's attention. Through the kitchen, I could see them all gathered in the living room, watching a movie on their enormous television. The sound was loud enough that they couldn't hear my knocking, or they were choosing not to hear it. I knocked harder. Still nothing. Finally, I started waving my arms, trying to catch someone's eye. Emma noticed me first, pointing in my direction and saying something to her mother. Olivia looked over, saw me gesticulating, and walked to the door with obvious irritation. "What's wrong, Mom?" she asked through the glass. "Could you unlock the side door?" I called back. "I'd like to get some air circulation." "The side door?" Olivia looked confused. Oh, that's locked for security. Trevor's very particular about that. But you've got the fan. The fan. The pathetic oscillating fan that was pushing around air so thick with humidity. It felt like breathing through a wet towel. Could I maybe come inside for a little while? I asked, hating how desperate I sounded. Just to cool off? Olivia glanced back toward the living room, where Patricia was clearly listening to our conversation despite pretending to watch the movie. The thing is, Mom, we're having a quiet family day. The kids are finally relaxing. And you know how disruptive it can be when we have too many people inside. Maybe later? Maybe later. The phrase that had become the soundtrack to this entire visit. She started to close the door, then paused. Oh, and could you keep it down out there? The sound carries, and we're trying to enjoy our movie. Keep it down. I was being told to keep quiet while sitting alone on a porch in 90-degree heat because my voice was disturbing their family movie day. The family movie day I wasn't invited to. I nodded and watched her walk back to the living room, settling onto the plush sofa next to Patricia, who immediately began whispering something in her ear. Both women glanced in my direction and then away quickly, as if I were an embarrassing topic of conversation. The afternoon dragged on with the relentless pace of torture. I watched them through the glass like a television show I wasn't allowed to participate in. I saw Emma curl up against Patricia during an exciting scene. I saw Jacob bring Patricia a glass of water without being asked. I saw Olivia lean against Trevor's shoulder while they shared a bowl of popcorn. I saw the family I dreamed of being part of, functioning perfectly without me. Around 4 o'clock, when the heat had become so oppressive that I was starting to feel dizzy, I made another attempt to get someone's attention. This time, I tried knocking in a rhythm. 3 short knocks, 3 long ones, 3 short ones again. SOS in Morse code. Something I remembered from a war movie I'd watched years ago. Jacob noticed first. Mom, Grandma's doing something weird with the door. Olivia looked over and sighed heavily. She paused the movie and walked to the door with the expression of someone dealing with a particularly demanding child. What now, Mom? I'm feeling a little lightheaded, I said honestly. Could I possibly have some water? For a moment, I saw something that might have been concern cross her face, but then Patricia appeared behind her. Heat exhaustion can be serious at her age, Patricia said. Not directly to me, but about me, as if I couldn't hear her. Maybe she should rest more. Older people don't regulate temperature as well. I could rest better with some water, I said, trying to keep desperation out of my voice. Of course, Olivia said. I'll bring you something. She disappeared and returned with a plastic water bottle, the kind you might give to someone working in your yard. She opened the door just wide enough to hand it to me, then closed it again immediately. The water was warm, not cold from the refrigerator, not even room temperature. Warm, like it had been sitting in a hot car. I drank it anyway because I was desperate, and because refusing it would only prove that I was being difficult. As evening approached, I heard them discussing dinner plans. They were going out. All of them, to a restaurant that had a children's menu and outdoor seating and everything a family needed for a perfect evening together. No one mentioned me. I sat in the growing darkness, listening to them get ready. Showers running, hair dryers humming, excited conversations about what everyone wanted to order. I heard car doors slam and the engine start, and then silence. They had left me alone. Not just alone in the porch, but alone in the house, in the dark. Without air conditioning or comfortable furniture, or any way to reach the outside world if something happened to me. I pulled out my phone to check the time and realized the battery was almost dead. Of course, how could I charge it? The porch had no electrical outlets, and I hadn't been inside long enough to plug it in anywhere. As full darkness settled over the neighborhood, I sat there with my dying phone, my empty water bottle, and the crushing realization that I'd become completely expendable to the people I loved most in the world. I tried to pray, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I found myself asking the question that had been growing in my heart since the moment I arrived. God, if I still matter to you, show me, because I'm disappearing. I closed my eyes and tried to feel his presence, tried to remember all the times he had carried me through difficult seasons, but all I could feel was the plastic chair sticking to my skin, and the weight of abandonment pressing down on me like the humid Florida air. When they returned from dinner 2 hours later, laughing and satisfied, no one checked on me. No one brought me leftovers. No one seemed to remember that I existed. I spent that night staring at the ceiling of the screened porch, listening to the sounds of a house settling around a family that had forgotten I was part of it, wondering if this was how I would spend the rest of my days, invisible, unwanted, slowly fading away until even I forgot who I used to be. And for the first time in my 72 years of faith, I wondered if God had forgotten about me too. The fourth morning arrived like a verdict I wasn't ready to hear. I had barely slept again, my body aching from 3 nights on plastic furniture, my heart aching from something far worse than physical discomfort. When I saw Olivia preparing breakfast through the glass, scrambled eggs, bacon, fresh fruit arranged beautifully on Patricia's plate, I made a decision that surprised even me. I was going to speak up. I knocked on the sliding door, firmly but politely. When Olivia looked over, I gestured for her to come outside. For a moment, she hesitated, clearly not wanting to leave the air-conditioned comfort of her kitchen. But something in my expression must have convinced her this was important. She stepped onto the porch, immediately flinching at the wall of heat and humidity that hit her. "Mom, what's wrong? You look upset." Upset. Such a mild word for the devastation I felt. "Olivia," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "I need to talk to you about this arrangement." "What arrangement?" "Me. Living on your porch. Like a pet." Her face immediately shifted into defensive mode, the expression she'd worn as a teenager when confronted about broken curfews or undone chores. "That's not fair, Mom. We're doing our best to accommodate you. The house is just full right now." "Your house is 3,000 square feet, Olivia. And Patricia is sleeping in the guest room that you told me was occupied by the children's things." The words hung between us like an accusation, which I suppose they were. "Patricia's different," Olivia said quickly. "She helps with the kids. She cooks. She cleans. She contributes to the household." "Contributes to the household? And what do I contribute?" I asked quietly. Olivia opened her mouth, then closed it. The silence stretched on for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds. In that silence, I heard the answer she couldn't bring herself to say out loud. "Nothing. You contribute nothing." "You know that's not what I meant," she finally said. But her voice lacked conviction. "Then what did you mean?" "I meant, God, Mom, why are you making this so difficult? We invited you here. We're hosting you. Can't you just be grateful?" Grateful? I should be grateful for a plastic chair and a dying phone, and 3 days of eating scraps like a stray dog. "I am grateful," I said, and I meant it. "I'm grateful to finally see where I stand in your life." Trevor appeared in the doorway then, clearly annoyed at being drawn into what he probably considered women's drama. "Is there a problem out here?" he asked, his tone suggesting that any problem would automatically be my fault. "Mom's upset about the sleeping arrangements," Olivia explained, as if I were a child complaining about bedtime. Trevor looked at me with barely concealed irritation. "Margaret, we explained the situation. The house is full. We've done what we can to make you comfortable." "Comfortable?" I repeated. "Trevor, would you be comfortable sleeping on a plastic chair for 3 nights in this heat?" "That's different," he said immediately. "How?" "Because," he paused, clearly struggling to articulate something that would sound reasonable. "Because older people are different. You're retired. You don't have the same pressures we do. A little discomfort isn't—" "A little discomfort." I stood up from the chair, my joints screaming in protest. "Trevor, I'm 72 years old. I worked for 47 years as a nurse. I raised your wife alone. I put her through college. I paid for your wedding. And you think I deserve to sleep outside like an animal because I don't have the same pressures you do?" The words came out louder than I intended, powered by 3 days of accumulated hurt and a lifetime of swallowed disappointments. Through the glass, I could see Emma and Jacob watching us with wide eyes, probably confused by the sight of their usually quiet grandmother raising her voice. "See, this is exactly what I was afraid of." Patricia's voice came from inside the house, loud enough for us all to hear. "Drama. Some people just can't accept hospitality gracefully. Some people." Olivia looked back toward the house, then at me, and I saw her make a choice. She chose them. Of course she did. "Mom, please lower your voice. You're upsetting the children." I was upsetting the children. Not the situation. Not the cruelty. Not the fact that their grandmother was being treated worse than a paying hotel guest. I was the problem. "Maybe," Trevor said with the tone of someone offering a reasonable compromise, "you'd be more comfortable at a hotel. There's a nice Days Inn about 10 minutes from here. We could help you get settled there." "A hotel?" They wanted to move me to a hotel so I wouldn't be an inconvenience to their family vacation with Patricia. You want me to leave? I said. It wasn't a question. We want you to be comfortable, Olivia said quickly. But she wouldn't meet my eyes. Where I won't be in the way, I continued. That's not where I won't disrupt your family time. Mom, please. Where I won't upset the children by existing in their space. Stop it! Olivia's voice cracked. Stop making me the villain here. I invited you. I tried to include you. It's not my fault that things are complicated right now. Complicated? My presence in my daughter's life was complicated. You're right, I said quietly. It's not your fault. It's mine. Relief flickered across her face. I'm glad you understand. It's my fault for believing that 50 years of loving you meant something. It's my fault for thinking that giving you everything I had would earn me a place at your table. It's my fault for expecting that when you invited your mother to visit, you actually wanted to see her. The relief disappeared, replaced by something that might have been shame, though she buried it quickly under anger. That's not fair, and you know it. What's not fair is that Patricia gets the guest room, the family meals, the children's affection, and the respect of being treated like a valued family member, while I get a plastic chair and explanations about why I should be grateful for it. Patricia doesn't make everything about herself, Olivia snapped. She doesn't create drama, or make people feel guilty for not doing enough. The words hit me like physical blows. So this was how she saw me. A selfish woman who created drama and made people feel guilty. Not a mother who had sacrificed everything for her daughter's happiness. Not a grandmother who just wanted to be included in the family she'd helped create. A burden. A source of guilt and drama. You know what? I said, feeling something inside me finally break. Not shatter, but break clean. Like a bone that would either heal stronger or never heal at all. You're right. I'm making this about me. For the first time in your entire life, I'm making something about me instead of about you. I turned and walked to the small suitcase I'd been living out of for 3 days, folding my few belongings with movements that felt automatic, disconnected from the storm raging in my chest. Where are you going? Olivia asked, and for a moment she sounded like the little girl who used to cry when I left for work. Somewhere I won't be complicated, I said without looking at her. Mom, don't be ridiculous. You can't just leave. How will you get home? The bus doesn't run until tomorrow. I zipped up my suitcase and faced her. In the morning light, she looked so much like the daughter I'd raised. Stubborn chin, defensive posture, eyes that were trying not to show hurt. But she also looked like a stranger, someone who could invite her mother to visit and then treat her like an unwanted obligation. I'll figure it out, I said. I've been figuring things out by myself for a very long time. This is ridiculous, Trevor said. You're being overly dramatic. Am I? I looked at him. This man who had been part of my family for 15 years, but had never once treated me like family. Trevor, let me ask you something. Would you treat your mother this way? He shifted uncomfortably. My mother doesn't... Your mother doesn't what? Need love? Deserve respect? Want to be included in her son's life? My mother contributes. There it is again. Contribution. What exactly does Patricia contribute that I don't? She helps. I offer to help. I offer to cook, to clean, to watch the children. You told me to stay out of the way. The truth hung in the air between us, ugly and undeniable. Mom, Olivia said, her voice softer now. Maybe we got off on the wrong foot. If you stay, we can what? Find a more comfortable piece of outdoor furniture for me to sleep on? Remember to bring me dinner occasionally? Include me in family activities when it's convenient? She didn't answer, because we both knew that was exactly what she was offering. Minor improvements to a fundamentally unacceptable situation. I raised you to be better than this, I said, picking up my suitcase. I raised you to understand that love isn't conditional on convenience. That family isn't something you participate in, only when it's easy. Don't lecture me about family, Olivia shot back. You have no idea what it's like to balance everyone's needs, to try to keep everyone happy. You're right, I said. I don't know what it's like to balance everyone's needs, because when I was raising you, your needs were the only ones that mattered. Every decision I made was about what was best for you. Every sacrifice I made was so you could have better opportunities than I did. I walked toward the side gate, testing the handle. Still locked. Trevor, I said, could you please unlock this gate so I can leave? For a moment, nobody moved. Then Trevor pulled out his keys and unlocked the gate with obvious reluctance. "This is crazy," he muttered. "She's being completely unreasonable." As I stepped through the gate, I heard Emma's voice from the kitchen window. "Where's Grandma going? Why is everyone yelling?" I stopped and looked back at Olivia, who was standing in the morning sun looking lost and angry, and maybe, just maybe, beginning to understand what she had done. "When Emma asks where I went," I said, "tell her that Grandma went somewhere she could sit inside. And when she asks why I left, tell her the truth." "What truth?" Olivia asked. "That sometimes loving someone means letting them go when they don't want you anymore." I turned and walked away from the house, carrying my small suitcase and the weight of 50 years of love that had apparently been worth 3 nights on a plastic chair. Behind me, I heard the gate close with a soft click. I didn't look back. As I walked down the sidewalk in the already brutal morning heat, I whispered a prayer that surprised me with its honesty. "Jesus, would you forgive this too? Should I forgive again? Because I don't know if I have any forgiveness left." The answer didn't come immediately, but for the first time in 3 days, I was walking towards something instead of sitting still and accepting whatever crumbs of love were thrown my way. And that felt like a kind of prayer in itself. I walked down Olivia's perfectly manicured suburban street with no destination in mind, just the desperate need to put distance between myself and the house where I'd spent 3 days, learning that love could die from neglect as surely as from hatred. The Florida sun was already merciless at 9 a.m., but for the first time in days, I was walking in it by choice, rather than sitting in it, because I had no other option. My suitcase wasn't heavy. I had packed light as requested. But after 2 blocks, my arm was aching, and my breathing was labored. 72 years old, walking down a strange street in a city I barely knew, with nowhere to go and very little money in my wallet. If I'd seen myself from the outside, I would have looked like what I was, a displaced old woman fleeing family dysfunction. But inside, something unexpected was happening. With each step away from that house, I felt a tiny bit of my dignity returning. I had spoken up. I had refused to accept the unacceptable. For the first time in decades, I had chosen my own well-being over someone else's convenience. It felt terrifying and liberating in equal measure. I stopped at a bus bench under a small patch of shade and sat down, pulling out my nearly dead phone. I had enough battery for maybe 1 phone call. But who would I call? Pastor Williams back in Gainesville would be concerned. But what could he do from 3 hours away? My neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, was kind, but she was 85 and couldn't help with anything requiring actual travel. The truth was stark and unavoidable. I had no one. In my dedication to being the perfect mother and grandmother, I had allowed all other relationships to fade into the background. I had no close friends, no extended family I stayed in touch with, no support network beyond the daughter who had just made it clear I was unwelcome in her life. A car pulled up to the curb, and my heart jumped. For a moment, I thought it might be Olivia, coming to apologize, to bring me back, to make this right. But it was just a neighbor returning from an errand, someone who glanced at me with the mild concern people show when they see an obviously displaced, elderly person in their neighborhood. I waved to show I was fine, and she drove on. As I sat there in the growing heat, I found myself thinking about something Pastor Williams had said in a sermon months ago. Sometimes God's greatest gifts come wrapped in our worst circumstances. Sometimes he has to allow our false foundations to crumble before he can build something real. False foundations. Had my entire relationship with Olivia been built on false foundations? Had I confused being needed with being loved? Had I mistaken duty for affection? My phone buzzed. A text message that made my heart race until I read it. "Mom, you left your medication on the porch table. Should I mail it to you?" Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "Please come back." Not, "I'm sorry for how we treated you." Just a practical question about medication, as if I were a house guest who had forgotten something. I stared at that message for a long time. My blood pressure medication, my arthritis pills, my heart medication, all sitting on that plastic table next to the chair that had been my prison for 3 days. Without them, I would be in serious trouble within a week. I could text back, ask her to bring them to me, humble myself one more time for the sake of my health. Instead, I typed, "Keep them. I'll get new prescriptions." Then I turned off my phone to save what little battery remained. The bus route map at the stop showed several options, but one caught my attention. Route 47 to Gulfview Beach. Something about the name called to me. I had enough cash for bus fare and maybe one meal. After that, I would have to figure things out. When the bus arrived 40 minutes later, the driver was a middle-aged black woman with kind eyes and a name tag that read, Dorothy. She looked at me with the experienced gaze of someone who had seen all kinds of human drama play out at bus stops. "You okay, honey?" she asked as I fumbled with change for the fare. "I'm getting there," I said, surprised by how honest that felt. "Where you headed?" "The beach. I need to think." She nodded like this made perfect sense. "Think in weather today. Seat behind me if you want to talk. Back of the bus if you want to be left alone." I chose a seat in the middle, not quite ready to talk, but not wanting to isolate myself completely. As the bus wound through Jacksonville's morning traffic, I watched the city change around me. Suburban developments gave way to older neighborhoods, then to commercial strips, then to the kind of small businesses and modest homes that reminded me of my own life back in Gainesville. Working people getting on and off the bus, carrying lunchboxes and wearing uniforms, going about their daily lives with the quiet dignity of people who understood that meaning came from showing up, not from having everything perfect. An elderly man got on at the third stop, moving slowly with a cane, and without thinking, I stood up to offer him my seat. "Thank you, dear," he said, settling down with obvious relief. Not many young people show that kind of courtesy anymore. Young people. He thought I was young people. When had someone last called me young? "My granddad taught me to respect my elders," I said, then realized how absurd that sounded coming from a 72-year-old woman. He laughed. "Your granddad raised you right. I'm 87, so I guess that makes you the youngster here." We chatted for the rest of his ride. About the weather, about how the city had changed, about nothing important, and everything essential. When he got off at his stop, he patted my hand and said, "Whatever's troubling you, honey, it's going to work out. God doesn't bring us this far to leave us." I cried after he left, not the bitter tears I'd shed on that porch, but something cleaner, sadder, more hopeful. Gulfview Beach was everything its name promised. A small coastal community with weathered buildings, and the kind of laid-back atmosphere that spoke of people who had figured out what mattered. The bus dropped me at a small station near the main street, and I walked toward the smell of salt air and the sound of waves. The beach itself was modest, but beautiful. No high-rise hotels or commercial development, just sand and water and a few local businesses that looked like they had been there for decades. I found a bench overlooking the water and sat down, breathing ocean air that felt like a baptism after 4 days of breathing family dysfunction. For the first time since arriving in Jacksonville, I prayed without desperation. "Lord," I whispered, "I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know where I'm going to sleep tonight or how I'm going to get home or what any of this means. But I'm here. I'm alive. I chose myself for once in my life. Show me what comes next." I wasn't sure how long I sat there, but eventually, hunger drove me to explore the main street. There was a small diner called Grace's Kitchen, with a handwritten sign that read, "All are welcome." Something about the name and the message drew me inside. The interior was simple but clean, with mismatched chairs and tables that spoke of years of faithful service rather than designer planning. A woman in her 60s approached with a coffee pot and the kind of smile that didn't cost extra. "Afternoon, honey. Just you today?" "Just me," I said. And for the first time, that didn't sound tragic. "Well, just you is plenty," she said, leading me to a small table by the window where I could watch people walking by on the street. "I'm Grace, and this is my place. What can I get you?" I ordered the lunch special. Meatloaf, mashed potatoes, green beans, comfort food that reminded me of meals I used to cook for Olivia when she was young. When Grace brought it out, the portions were generous, and the food was prepared with care. "You're not from around here," Grace observed, refilling my coffee cup. "No, I'm visiting from Gainesville. Sort of. Sort of visiting?" I found myself telling her everything. About the porch, about the plastic chair, about 3 days of being treated like an inconvenience by the daughter I'd raised alone, about walking away with nowhere to go and no plan beyond needing to be somewhere I could breathe. Grace listened without judgment, occasionally nodding or making small sounds of understanding. When I finished, she sat down across from me. "How long since you did something just for yourself?" she asked. I thought about it. I don't know. Years. Maybe decades. "And how did it feel? Walking away from that house?" "Scary," I said honestly. "But also, right. Like I was finally acting like the person I taught my daughter to be. Someone who doesn't accept being treated badly, just because the person doing it is family. Grace smiled. Funny how we teach our children lessons we forget to apply to ourselves. She stood up and walked to the counter, returning with a small piece of paper. There's a woman named Ruth who runs a little bed and breakfast about 6 blocks from here. Christian lady. Widow like yourself. She's got a room that's been empty for weeks, and she's not picky about advance reservations or credit checks. Tell her Grace sent you. I don't have much money, I said. Ruth's not much concerned with money. She's more concerned with people who need a safe place to figure things out. I looked at the address on the paper, then at Grace's kind face. Why are you helping me? Because 20 years ago, I was where you are. Different circumstances. Same feeling of being completely lost and alone. Someone helped me then. Now it's my turn to pass it on. I paid for my meal, leaving a tip I probably couldn't afford, and walked the 6 blocks to Ruth's place with something I hadn't felt in days. Hope. The house was a small Victorian painted pale yellow, with a front porch that had rocking chairs and hanging baskets of flowers. A sign by the door read, Ocean View Grace, a home away from home. Ruth answered my knock within moments, as if she'd been expecting me. She was perhaps my age, with silver hair pulled back in a simple bun, and eyes that held the particular kind of wisdom that comes from surviving life's hardest lesson. You must be Margaret, she said. Grace called, said you might need a place to rest for a while. How did she know my name? I asked, confused. Ruth smiled. Small towns. Word travels fast. Plus, you look exactly like someone who needs what we offer here. Which is? Peace. Dignity. A place to remember who you are when nobody's watching. She showed me to a small but comfortable room on the 2nd floor, with a window that looked out over the beach and furniture that was clearly chosen for comfort rather than style. There was a Bible on the nightstand, a rocking chair by the window, and most importantly, a lock on the door that I controlled. Dinner's at 6 if you want company, Ruth said. Breakfast is whenever you wake up. No rules except respect and honesty. Some people stay a day, some stay a month. You'll know when it's time to go. After she left, I sat in the rocking chair and looked out at the ocean. For the first time in 4 days, I was inside a building by choice. I had a real bed, a private bathroom, and most importantly, the knowledge that I was wanted here. Not as someone's obligation or burden, but as a human being worthy of basic respect. I pulled out my dead phone and stared at it for a moment, then put it in the drawer of the nightstand. Whatever messages were waiting could wait longer. Tonight, I was going to sleep in a real bed, wake up when my body was ready, and begin the process of remembering who Margaret Dawson was when she wasn't busy being everyone else's idea of what she should be. For the first time in decades, I was going to make choices based on what I needed rather than what others expected. And that felt like the beginning of something I hadn't dared to hope for. Freedom. I had been at Ruth's bed and breakfast for 5 days when my phone finally died completely. 5 days of sleeping in a real bed, eating meals at a proper table, and slowly remembering what it felt like to be treated with basic human dignity. 5 days of morning prayers on the porch overlooking the ocean, afternoon walks on the beach, and evening conversations with Ruth that helped me understand I wasn't losing my mind. I was finding my voice. On the 6th morning, Ruth knocked gently on my door with something that looked like concern on her face. Margaret, dear. There's a young woman downstairs asking for you. Says she's your daughter. My heart clenched. Olivia had found me. I took my time getting dressed, choosing a simple blue dress that brought out my eyes and brushing my hair carefully. I wasn't sure why it mattered, but I wanted to face whatever was coming while looking like the dignified woman I was remembering myself to be. Olivia was standing in Ruth's front parlor looking completely out of place among the comfortable, lived-in furniture and family photographs. She was dressed expensively, perfectly, like someone who had never questioned whether she belonged in any room she entered. When she saw me, her expression was a mixture of relief, anger, and something that might have been guilt. Mom, thank God. I've been looking everywhere for you. How did you find me? I asked, not moving closer to her. I hired a private investigator. Do you have any idea how worried I've been? Worried. She'd been worried. Not sorry, not ashamed, not repentant. Worried. I left you a message about where I was going, I said calmly. I told you I'd figure things out. A text saying you were getting new prescriptions isn't exactly a forwarding address, Mom. Ruth appeared in the doorway, clearly sensing tension. Would you ladies like some coffee? You're welcome to use the front porch if you need privacy. Thank you, I said. But I think we can talk here. Olivia looked around the modest room with barely concealed disdain. Mom, what is this place? When the investigator told me you were staying at some boarding house, I couldn't believe it. It's a bed and breakfast, I said. Run by a lovely Christian woman who believes people deserve to be treated with kindness. The barb hit its mark. Olivia flinched slightly, then sat down uninvited on Ruth's sofa. Look, I know you're upset about how things went at the house. Upset? I remained standing, looking down at her. Olivia, you made me sleep outside for 3 days in 90-degree heat. You locked me on a porch like a pet. You excluded me from every family meal, every family activity, every basic courtesy you would show a stranger. Upset doesn't begin to cover what I am. It wasn't like that, she said quickly. You're exaggerating. Am I? Tell me, where did Patricia sleep? Olivia's mouth opened, then closed. Tell me about the family movie day I wasn't invited to, the restaurant dinner I wasn't included in, the breakfast conversations that happened while I sat outside, begging for water. You're being dramatic. I'm being honest. For the first time in 50 years, I'm being completely honest with you about how you've treated me. Olivia stood up, her face flushing with anger. How I've treated you. Mom, I've been supporting you for years. I send you money every month. I call you every week. I invited you to visit. You send me $200 a month out of guilt, not love. You call me when you're driving somewhere and have nothing better to do. And you invited me to visit so you could show me exactly how little I matter to your real family. The words came out with a clarity that surprised me. 5 days of peace had given me the strength to see our relationship clearly, without the desperation and hope that had clouded my vision for so long. That's not fair, Olivia said, but her voice lacked conviction. What's not fair is that I spent 50 years putting your needs before my own, and you repaid me by treating me like an embarrassing obligation. You introduced me to your dinner guests as Trevor's mother-in-law. Not as your mother. Not as Margaret. As an in-law. Do you have any idea how that felt? Olivia sat back down heavily, and for a moment I saw a flicker of the little girl who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. I didn't mean to hurt you, she said quietly. But you did. And when I tried to talk to you about it, you made it clear that my comfort, my dignity, and my feelings were less important than keeping Patricia happy and avoiding any inconvenience to your family. Mom, please, just come home with me. We can work this out. Who's home? I asked. The house where I'm not welcome inside? The family where I don't have a seat at the table? You do have a seat. On the porch. In the heat. Alone. Olivia was crying now, but they were frustrated tears, not repentant ones. I don't know what you want from me. I want you to understand that love isn't just a feeling, Olivia. It's actions. It's choices. It's treating people with respect and dignity because they matter to you, not because it's convenient. I sat down across from her, close enough to see the little girl I'd raised, but far enough away to maintain the boundaries I was finally learning to set. When you were 8 years old, I continued, you broke Mrs. Patterson's window with a baseball. Do you remember what I taught you to do? I had to go apologize and offer to pay for it with my allowance money. And why was that important? Because when you hurt someone, you make it right. Exactly. When you hurt someone, you make it right. You don't explain why it wasn't really your fault. You don't minimize the damage. You don't ask the hurt person to just get over it. You acknowledge the harm. You apologize sincerely, and you change your behavior. Olivia wiped her eyes. I'm here, aren't I? I hired a private investigator to find you. I drove 3 hours to bring me back to the same situation that made me leave. Have you changed anything about how you plan to treat me? Have you had any conversations with Trevor and Patricia about how I was excluded? Have you made any arrangements to ensure I would actually be welcomed in your home instead of tolerated on your porch? The silence stretched between us, filled with the weight of answers she couldn't give. I thought so, I said gently. You're not here to make things right, Olivia. You're here because my absence is inconvenient. Because having a missing mother makes you look bad. Because you want the situation to go back to normal so you don't have to examine how you've been treating me. That's not true, she protested. But again, her voice lacked conviction. Then prove it. Tell me exactly what you would do differently if I came back." She opened her mouth, then closed it. We both knew she had no answer because she hadn't considered changing anything. She had expected me to return, grateful for whatever crumbs of attention she was willing to offer. "Mom, I need you to come home. The kids are asking questions. Trevor's family is gossiping. People are starting to talk about how you just disappeared." And there it was, the real reason she was here. Not because she missed me or realized she'd been wrong, but because my absence was causing her social embarrassment. "Let me ask you something," I said, standing up and walking to the window where I could see the ocean Ruth had taught me to find peace in. "Do you love me?" "Of course I love you. You're my mother." "That's not what I asked. I asked if you love me. Margaret, the person I am. Not the role I play in your life or the duties I fulfill, or the guilt you feel about how I sacrificed for you. Do you actually love me?" The question hung in the air like a judgment. I watched her face in the window's reflection, saw her struggle with an answer that should have been immediate and obvious. Of course I do." "Then why don't you like me?" "What?" I turned back to face her. "You love me because I'm your mother and you're supposed to. But do you actually like me? Do you enjoy my company? Do you look forward to spending time with me? When was the last time you called me just because you wanted to hear my voice, not because you felt obligated to check in?" Olivia stared at me, clearly never having considered the distinction between loving someone out of duty and actually enjoying their presence. "I don't think you like me very much," I continued. "I think you see me as a reminder of a life you've moved beyond. I think you're embarrassed by my job, my apartment, my lack of sophistication. I think you tolerate me because I'm your mother, but you don't actually want me in your life. That's not... And you know what? That's okay. You're allowed to not like me. But I'm not required to pretend that feels good, or to accept treatment that reflects your lack of genuine affection." I sat back down, feeling calmer than I had in years. "For 50 years, I've been trying to earn your love by being whatever you needed me to be. The perfect mother, the grateful grandmother, the convenient source of financial and emotional support, who never asked for anything in return. And it's exhausting, Olivia. It's exhausting to love someone who sees you as an obligation." "Mom, please, I'm not finished." My voice was firm but not angry. "I forgive you for how you treated me last week. I forgive you for the years of taking me for granted. I forgive you for seeing me as a burden rather than a blessing. But I won't enable you anymore." "What does that mean?" "It means I won't come running every time you decide you need me. It means I won't accept invitations to be ignored and excluded. It means I won't pretend that your guilt payments make up for your lack of genuine affection." I reached into my purse and pulled out a piece of paper. Ruth's business card with my temporary address written on the back. "This is where I'll be for the next few weeks while I figure out what comes next," I said, handing it to her. "If you decide you actually want a relationship with me, not because you're supposed to, but because you want to, you know where to find me. But I won't accept anything less than being treated like a person you actually care about." Olivia stared at the card like it was written in a foreign language. "I love you," I said, standing up to signal the conversation was over. "I will always love you, but I respect myself too much to keep begging for scraps of affection from my own daughter." "Mom, you can't just leave. What about family? What about forgiveness? What about all those Bible verses you taught me about turning the other cheek?" I smiled, remembering the 8-year-old who had memorized scripture to please me. "The Bible also says, 'Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it.' I'm guarding my heart, sweetheart. For the first time in my life, I'm protecting it instead of giving it away to people who don't treasure it." I walked her to the door, where Ruth was discreetly tending her garden, but clearly within earshot if I needed support. "I love you, Olivia," I said one more time. "When you're ready to love me back, really love me, not just feel obligated to me, I'll be here." I watched her drive away in her expensive car, back to her perfect house with her chosen family, and I felt something I hadn't expected. Peace. I had finally chosen myself, and it felt like the most faithful thing I'd ever done. 3 weeks after Olivia's visit, I woke up in my little room at Ruth's place and realized something extraordinary. I was happy. Not content, not resigned, not making the best of a bad situation. Actually, happy. The morning sun was streaming through my window, painting golden rectangles on the hardwood floor, and for the first time in decades, I had nowhere I had to be, except exactly where I was. "Good morning, Lord," I whispered, as had become my custom. "Thank you for this day, for this place, for showing me that my life isn't over. It's just beginning." Ruth had become more than a landlady. She had become the sister I never had. Every morning she would have coffee ready on the front porch, and we would sit in comfortable silence or gentle conversation, watching the world wake up around us. She never pressured me to talk about my situation, never offered unwanted advice, never made me feel like a charity case. She simply made space for me to exist exactly as I was. "You know," she said this particular morning, passing me a cup of coffee in a beautiful ceramic mug. Not paper, not plastic, but real china that said I was worth using the good dishes for. "The Methodist church down the street is looking for someone to help with their Wednesday evening meals for seniors. Volunteer position, but they feed the volunteers too. And the company's lovely." I had been thinking about volunteering somewhere. The days were peaceful but long, and I missed having purpose beyond my own healing. More than that, I missed the feeling of being useful, of having skills that mattered to other people. "What kind of help do they need?" I asked. "Cooking, serving, cleanup. Nothing too strenuous, but mostly just being present with people who don't get much company. A lot of them are in situations similar to yours, families that are too busy or too far away or too complicated." The idea of helping other people who felt forgotten stirred something in my chest that had been dormant for months. Not the desperate need to be needed that had driven so much of my relationship with Olivia, but the quieter satisfaction of using my gifts to make someone else's day a little brighter. "I'd like to try that," I said. That Wednesday evening, I walked the 4 blocks to Gulfview Methodist, a small brick church that looked like it had been serving its community faithfully for generations. The fellowship hall was warm and welcoming, filled with the sound of conversations and the smell of home-cooked food. Pastor Janet, a woman about my age with laugh lines and hands that spoke of years of honest work, introduced me to the other volunteers and the dozen seniors who came for dinner each week. "Margaret used to be a nurse," Ruth had told her, and suddenly I found myself surrounded by people who wanted to hear about my career, my experiences, my knowledge about health and wellness, not as someone's mother or grandmother or obligation, but as a professional who had dedicated her life to caring for others. "I've been having trouble with my blood pressure medication," said Eleanor, a woman in her 80s who lived alone in a small apartment near the beach. "My doctor keeps changing it, but nothing seems to work right." For the first time in months, I felt useful. I sat with Eleanor, asked her questions about her symptoms and side effects, helped her organize her medications in a weekly pill dispenser, and suggested questions she might ask her doctor at her next appointment. "You're an answer to prayer," she said, patting my hand. "I've been so confused about all these pills. You made everything make sense. An answer to prayer." When had someone last said that about me? The evening flew by. I helped serve meatloaf and mashed potatoes, sat with people who were hungry for conversation as much as food, and cleaned up afterward with the other volunteers who welcomed me like I'd been part of their team for years. "Same time next week?" Pastor Janet asked as I prepared to leave. "I wouldn't miss it," I said, meaning it completely. Walking home in the gentle evening air, I felt lighter than I had in years. I had spent 3 hours focused entirely on other people's needs. But unlike the exhausting, one-sided giving that had characterized my relationship with Olivia, this felt reciprocal. I was needed, but I was also valued. I was contributing, but I was also receiving. Community, purpose, recognition of my worth as a person. The next morning, Ruth had news that would change everything. "Margaret, I've been thinking," she said over our morning coffee. "I'm getting older, and this place is getting to be more than I can handle alone. I've been praying about what to do, and I think God might have sent you here for more than just healing." I looked at her curiously. "How would you feel about becoming my partner? Not just a guest, but co-owner of this business? I need someone with your nursing background, your people skills, your heart for hospitality, and you need—" She paused, seeming to choose her words carefully. "You need a place where you're essential, not optional. Essential, not optional." The phrase hit me like a revelation. "Ruth, I don't have money to invest in a business. I'm not talking about money, dear. I'm talking about partnership. Your skills and energy in exchange for half ownership and a permanent home. This place needs someone who understands how to care for people, and you need somewhere to build a life that's entirely your own." I stared at her, hardly daring to believe what she was offering. A business partnership. A permanent home. A chance to use my nursing skills and hospitality gifts to create something meaningful. "But what if—" I began, then stopped myself. What if Olivia needed me? What if she came back, ready to treat me better? What if I was supposed to return to my old life? Ruth seemed to read my thoughts. "What if you built a life so beautiful that people would be grateful to be invited into it? Instead of building your life around hoping someone else would invite you into theirs." That afternoon I called a lawyer in Jacksonville. Not to handle family drama, but to explore the practical aspects of Ruth's proposal. By evening, we'd outlined a partnership agreement that felt fair and sustainable. I would bring my nursing expertise and guest services skills, while Ruth would provide the property and existing business foundation. For the first time in my adult life, I was making a major decision based entirely on what I wanted, not on what someone else needed from me. That Sunday, I attended Gulfview Methodist for the first time. The congregation was small but warm, filled with people who had clearly chosen this community church for the same reasons I was drawn to it. Authenticity over pretense, substance over appearance, genuine care over social obligation. During the prayer request time, Pastor Janet asked if anyone had gratitude to share. I stood up, my heart pounding but my voice steady. "I'm Margaret Dawson, and I'm new to your community. 3 weeks ago I was homeless and heartbroken, sleeping on my daughter's porch because she couldn't find room for me in her house. Today I'm entering into a business partnership that will let me use my gifts to care for other people while building a life that's entirely my own." The congregation murmured approval and amends. "I want to thank God for showing me that sometimes losing everything you thought you wanted is the only way to find everything you actually need." After the service, people approached me with warmth and curiosity. Not pity for my situation, but genuine interest in who I was and what I had to offer their community. "We need someone with medical background for our parish nurse ministry," said Mrs. Collins, a spry woman in her 70s who seemed to be involved in every church activity. "The community college has been looking for someone to teach basic nursing skills in their continuing education program," added Tom Bradley, whose wife had been a nurse before she passed away. "We could use help coordinating the meal train for new mothers and people recovering from surgery," suggested another woman whose name I didn't catch, but whose smile was genuine. For the first time in my adult life, I was being recruited rather than tolerated. People saw my skills and experience as assets to be celebrated rather than inconveniences to be managed. That evening, I sat on Ruth's front porch, soon to be our front porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink that reminded me of God's faithfulness. My phone, which I'd finally gotten repaired and recharged, sat silent beside me. No calls from Olivia. No texts asking when I was coming home. No guilt-laden messages about how my absence was affecting anyone else. And for the first time, that silence felt like freedom rather than abandonment. I pulled out the small journal I'd started keeping since arriving at Ruth's and wrote, "Today I realized that I spent 50 years trying to make myself essential to people who saw me as optional. I twisted myself into shapes that didn't fit my soul, trying to earn love from people who had already decided how little I was worth to them. But God had different plans. He brought me to a place where my gifts are celebrated, where my presence is desired, where my contributions matter. He showed me that I don't have to diminish myself to fit into someone else's life. I can build a life so full and beautiful that others would be honored to be part of it. I am not a leftover piece of someone else's puzzle. I am a complete picture, valuable in my own right, worthy of love and respect and celebration." As I wrote those words, I felt a peace settle over me that I hadn't experienced since I was a young woman, before I learned to define myself through other people's needs and opinions. Tomorrow, Ruth and I would start planning renovations to expand the bed and breakfast, adding a small medical clinic where I could provide basic health services to guests and community members. We would design a life of service that honored both our gifts and our boundaries, that gave generously without depleting ourselves. I was 62 years old when I first became a mother. I was 72 when I finally learned to mother myself. And Jesus had been with me through every step of this journey, even when I couldn't feel his presence, especially then. "Thank you," I whispered to the evening air. "Thank you for loving me enough to let my false life fall apart so my real life could begin." The ocean breeze carried my prayer out over the water, and I knew with absolute certainty that it had been heard. 6 months later, I stood in the renovated lobby of Ocean View Grace Retreat and Wellness Center, watching Ruth arrange fresh flowers from our garden in a vase on the reception desk. The morning sun streamed through windows that we had enlarged to let in more of God's light, and I marveled at how different this place looked, how different I looked, from that broken woman who had arrived with nothing but a suitcase and a wounded heart. The bed and breakfast had become something neither Ruth nor I had imagined when we first shook hands on our partnership. Word had spread through the community about our unique combination of hospitality and healthcare, and we found ourselves hosting not just tourists, but women in transition, those recovering from divorces, dealing with family crises, or simply needing a place to rediscover who they were when nobody was watching. "Margaret," Ruth called from behind the desk. "Mrs. Henderson from Jacksonville is on the phone. She wants to book a week-long stay. Says her friend told her about our healing retreats, and she needs time to process her daughter moving her into assisted living against her wishes." I smiled, recognizing myself in that story. Tell her we have the perfect room available, and that dinner conversations here have a way of helping people find their voice. Our morning routine had become a meditation in purpose. I would start each day with prayer on the front porch, thanking God for the gift of a life built on my own terms. Then I would review the day's guests, checking on anyone who needed medical attention, planning activities for those who wanted community, and ensuring that everyone felt seen and valued. Today was special, though. Today marked exactly 6 months since I had walked away from Olivia's house, and I had planned a small celebration, not of my daughter's failure to love me well, but of my success in learning to love myself. The phone rang as I was setting up for our weekly Bible study group. 8 women from the community who gathered every Tuesday to study scripture and share the kinds of honest conversations that churches sometimes struggle to make space for. "Ocean View Grace, this is Margaret." "Mom?" My heart stopped. Olivia's voice, but different somehow. Smaller, less certain. "Hello, Olivia. I've been thinking about what you said, about the difference between loving someone and liking them, about respecting yourself." Her voice cracked slightly. "I think I understand now." I sat down in the chair behind our reception desk, the one Ruth had insisted on buying because business partners deserve beautiful workspaces. "What's happened?" I asked, not with the desperate hope of our previous conversations, but with the calm concern I might show any troubled person who needed help. "Trevor's mother moved in with us 3 weeks ago. Patricia. She had a minor stroke, nothing life-threatening, but she needs help with daily activities. And, Mom?" Olivia's voice broke completely. "I put her in our guest room and expected her to be grateful. I've been treating her exactly the way I treated you, and I finally understand how cruel that was." I closed my eyes, feeling a complex mixture of sadness for Olivia's pain and validation that my decision to leave had been right. "I'm sorry you're struggling," I said genuinely. "She cries at night," Olivia continued. "Patricia cries at night because she can tell we don't really want her here. We take care of her body, but we ignore her heart. And I finally realized that's exactly what I did to you." I waited, letting her find her own words. "I called to apologize, really apologize. Not to ask you to come back and pretend everything's fine, but to tell you that you were right about everything. I didn't like you. I loved you because I was supposed to, but I didn't enjoy your company or value your opinions or treat you like someone I actually wanted in my life." The honesty was startling and painful, and somehow healing all at once. "And I called to tell you that I do like you now. I've been thinking about who you really are. Not just my mother, but Margaret, the woman who worked double shifts to put me through college, who taught me to be honest, even when it was difficult, who raised me to stand up for what's right even when it's inconvenient." She paused, and I could hear her crying. "You stood up for what was right when you left, Mom. You taught me the most important lesson of my life by refusing to accept being treated badly, even by me. Especially by me." I looked around the lobby of the life I'd built. The retreat center that was helping other women find their voices, the community of people who valued my gifts, the partnership with Ruth that honored both our strengths. "Thank you for saying that," I said. "It means more than you know." "I want to visit you," Olivia said quickly. "Not to bring you back, but to see who you've become, to meet this version of my mother who chose herself. Ruth gave me your address when I called the bed and breakfast, and she told me about your business partnership, about the work you're doing with women in transition. I'm so proud of you, Mom. Proud of me." When had she last said that? "You're welcome to visit. I said. "But I need you to understand something. This isn't a negotiation about my return to our old relationship. This is my life now. I'm not looking for rescue or reconciliation that requires me to diminish myself again." "I know," she said quickly. "I'm not asking you to come back. I'm asking if I can learn how to be part of your life the way it is now. As a daughter who likes her mother and wants to know her, not just as someone fulfilling an obligation." 2 weeks later, Olivia arrived at Ocean View Grace for a 3-day visit. I watched her pull up in her expensive car and take in the sight of our renovated Victorian house, the garden Ruth and I had planted together, the sign that read, "A place of healing and hope," in elegant script. When she got out of the car, I saw immediately that something fundamental had changed. She was still well-dressed, still clearly successful, but the edge of superiority that had always characterized her demeanor was gone. She looked at me with what appeared to be genuine curiosity, rather than judgment. "Mom," she said, and her hug felt different, longer, more present, like she was actually happy to see me rather than checking a box on her duty list. I showed her around our property, introduced her to Ruth, explained the work we were doing with our guests. She listened with real attention, asked thoughtful questions, and never once suggested that I was wasting my skills or settling for less than I deserved. "This is incredible," she said as we stood on the front porch overlooking the ocean. "You've built something beautiful here, something that matters." That evening, she joined our weekly community dinner, a tradition Ruth and I had started where guests, volunteers, and local friends gathered for a potluck meal and conversation. I watched Olivia interact with Eleanor, who still came for our medical clinics, with Pastor Janet, who had become a close friend, with Mrs. Collins, who had convinced me to teach a first aid class at the community college. "Your mother is a treasure," Eleanor told Olivia over dessert. "She probably saved my life by helping me organize my medications and advocating with my doctor. We're lucky to have her here." I saw something shift in Olivia's face as she heard person after person talk about my contributions to their community, my skills as a nurse, my wisdom as a counselor, my gifts as a friend. She was seeing me through other people's eyes, not as her obligation, but as a valuable person in my own right. On her last morning, we sat on the porch with our coffee, watching the sunrise paint the sky in brilliant colors. "I need to ask you something," Olivia said. "Will you forgive me? Not the polite, Christian forgiveness that lets everyone pretend nothing happened, but real forgiveness that acknowledges I hurt you terribly, and that I need to do better." I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. She was 44 years old, successful in her career, mother to 2 children, married to a man who provided well for his family. But in that moment, she looked like the little girl who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms, seeking comfort and security from the mother who had always been her safe harbor. "I forgave you months ago," I said honestly. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or pretending the past didn't happen. It means choosing not to let your past choices define our future relationship. "What does that look like?" she asked. "It looks like building something new," I said, "based on who we are now, not who we used to be, based on mutual respect rather than obligation, based on choosing each other because we want to, not because we have to." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I want that," she said. "I want to know you, Mom. The real you. Not just the mother who gave up everything for me, but Margaret Dawson. The woman who built this amazing life after deciding she deserved better than what I was giving her." Over the next year, Olivia visited every few months. Sometimes she brought Emma and Jacob, who were fascinated by our retreat center and loved helping Ruth in the garden. Sometimes she came alone, for what she called Margaret time. Conversations about life and faith and dreams that had nothing to do with her childhood or my sacrifices. She also made changes at home. Patricia was moved to a beautiful assisted living facility, where she received professional care while maintaining her independence. Olivia joined a support group for adult children, learning to navigate relationships with aging parents. She started therapy to understand why she had found it so difficult to see me as a complete person, rather than just a role in her life. Most importantly, she stopped sending me monthly guilt payments and started investing in our actual relationship. She would call to tell me about books she thought I'd enjoy, or to ask my advice about nursing home care for a friend's parent, or simply to say she'd been thinking about me. The woman who had once introduced me as Trevor's mother-in-law now talked proudly to anyone who would listen about her mother's business. Her work with women in transition. Her wisdom about healthcare and hospitality. Last month, Olivia brought me something that took my breath away. A framed photo of herself, Emma, Jacob, and me, taken during their most recent visit. But it wasn't the photo that made me cry. It was the inscription she had written on the back, to Margaret Dawson, the woman who taught me that love means helping people become their best selves, not accepting whatever they're willing to give you. Thank you for loving me enough to show me the difference. Your proud daughter, Olivia. Today, as I write the final entry in the journal I started that first week at Ruth's, I am 73 years old. I wake up every morning in a home I own, doing work that matters, surrounded by people who choose to be in my life because they value what I bring to theirs. I am not the woman who slept on a plastic chair, begging for scraps of love from people who saw me as a burden. I am not the mother who sacrificed herself so completely that she forgot she was a person worthy of love and respect. I am Margaret Dawson, co-owner of a thriving business, beloved member of a faith community, mentor to women finding their voices, friend to people who celebrate my gifts rather than tolerate my presence. And I am Olivia's mother, not because I gave birth to her, or because I raised her, or because I sacrificed for her, but because we choose each other every day, building a relationship based on mutual respect and genuine affection. God had to allow my false life to crumble completely before I could build my real life. He had to let me lose everything I thought I wanted before I could find everything I actually needed. He was with me on that porch, in my pain and humiliation, preparing my heart for the life he had always intended for me. A life of dignity, purpose, and love, freely given and joyfully received. To anyone listening who has ever felt invisible in their own family, who has ever been treated like an obligation rather than a blessing, who has ever wondered if standing up for yourself is worth the risk of losing everything. It is. God sees you, values you, and has plans for your life that go far beyond making other people comfortable. You are not too old to start over. You are not too invested in your current situation to change it. You are not required to accept treatment that diminishes your worth as a child of God. Have you ever felt like Margaret, forgotten by those you love most? Have you ever had to choose between keeping peace and keeping your dignity? How did your faith help you through that season? I'd love to hear your story in the comments below. If this message touched your heart, please like this video and subscribe to our channel so it can reach someone else who needs to hear that they matter, they're loved, and they deserve better. May God bless everyone who has ever had to choose themselves in order to save themselves. In Jesus' name, amen.